Lesson 1, English words ending AL. Okay, if you haven't seen the preview to this course or missed one of the promo videos, this course uses something called language transfer along with something called the thinking method. Now, rather than explain these to you, we'll jump straight in and see this in action. So if we take any English word that ends AL, say normal, and we add NY to the end, we get the Polish version. And it's as simple as that. So almost all English words that end AL, all we need to do is put the NY on the end and we've got the Polish. But we need to know how to pronounce it because Polish is pronounced in a very specific way, which we'll go into in some detail in a moment. Okay, so let's hear that word in Polish.
Normalne. Normalne.
Right, so this very normal word, and that was a purposeful pun, this very normal word is going to teach us an awful lot. First of all, Polish is spoken as it's written. So in that word, normalna, we've got o as in orbit. And we can hear that we need to roll the R a bit. So like in tomorrow, we've got that R. If you're Scottish, you've probably got that easily. If you're English, it might come a little bit harder to you. Okay, and we've got A as in apple. Now, every time you see those letters in a different Polish word, you'll know how to pronounce them. To the point that you'll be able to pronounce Polish words that you don't even understand. You don't even know their meaning. Okay, so O as in orbit, roll the R, and A as in apple. Now, the final thing we need to do is know where to stress the word, where to put our stress point in the word. So let's just listen to it again.
Normalne. Normalne.
And you might be able to hear it's on the A. It's in that mal that gets the stress, that gets pushed down on, that gets the emphasis in that word. And that's always the case in Polish, that it's in the penultimate syllable. So not the last syllable, but the syllable before. That's where you push down, that's where you express the most. Now, you don't need to get that right straight away, but that you should always bear in mind and practice it, because that is the way that Polish is spoken fluently. Far more important is the pronunciation of the letters, the O, the R and the A. Now, just like in English, we can flip a word from being a statement into being a question. We just, exactly as we do in English, need to raise our pitch a little at the end. So let's hear that for asking normal.
Normalne. Normalne.
So this is great because, if you're out walking with a friend or someone who's Polish and you see something in Poland that you think is a bit unusual, it's not something you come across in your culture, you can simply ask your Polish friend or colleague, normal? And they might reply, or you would ask them, normalne? And they might reply to you, normalne. So already that's a very useful word to have, especially if you're actually in Poland itself. Okay, let's try another one. The English word for legal. Legal. Now, here's where the thinking method kicks in, or part of the thinking method. I don't need to teach you the Polish word for legal, because you already know how to get it. You can already think it out. We've got this rule that if the English word ends AL, we just need to add NY to it to get that N sound, the N at the end. So, and we can also see there's an A in there, and we know that A is like apple, so we know how to pronounce the last part. It's going to be galne. So we just need to know how to pronounce the first part of the word.
Legalne. Legalne.
And there we can hear that the E is said like E in elephant, an E sound, E. And again, now, whenever you see the letter E in any Polish word, you're going to know how to pronounce it, because it never changes.
Legalne. Legalne.
All right, let's try one more, a slightly longer word. universal, universal. Again, I don't need to teach you what the Polish word for universal is. You've got this transfer method to get it over, so you just need to think about it, add the ny to the end, and you've got the Polish. Now, there's something slightly extra about universal, and that is that the Polish language doesn't have a letter for V. Instead, they use W. And so W in Polish has the V sound, the V. If you like to try to remember it, think of it as two V's together. It's a double V instead of a V. V just does not exist. Okay, now we know the E is in there and the A is in there. We know how to say that. E as in elephant, A as in apple, and we know the N from the previous words. So let's try hearing the start of the word.
Uniwersalny. Uniwersalny.
Okay, so we've got this U, and once you've seen the letter U and heard the letter U, whenever you see the letter U again, it's pronounced the same way. It's kind of like an U as in oops. And then you've got the I, and the I is like in ski, so it's the E sound. Okay, and of course, just remembering where to stress the word on that penultimate syllable.
Uniwersalny. Uniwersalny.
Now, we can play around a bit with this and discover some other things about Polish. So if Polish uses the letter W for a V sound, then how would they say www, as in the World Wide Web?
W.
That's it. It's this V sound. A soft V, and that's how they would sort of express a website. Now, one of the other things about Polish is that when we're talking about a particular website, they don't tend to use the word dot. So we would say something like www.bing.com. In Polish, they just leave a slight pause where the dot would be. So let's just listen to that.
www.bing.com.
So, like sort of all one sentence, just a pause where the dot should be. So, now we know a few things. We know O as in orbit, and we know E is like in elephant, and we know Polish is spoken the way it is written. So, have a stab at how you would say Google in Polish. How would you say Google in Polish?
Google. Google.
Now, I said to you at the very beginning that if you want to get the English word that ends AL into Polish, you just add NY and get the N. You just tag the N onto it. Now, that isn't 100% true. If you are watching this with someone who is Polish, or you run it past someone who's Polish, they're going to say, well, it doesn't always end with a Y. You know, it might sometimes end in an E, might sometimes end in an A, something like this. That's true. But if we're talking about you starting to get communicating, then you just start with the base, which is normalne. Okay, start with that. If you use that in every situation where you want to say the word normal, you will be understood. However, pronunciation is actually far more important, and it's from pronunciation that you can say things too much in the English way, and that's where it all falls down. And I'll give you an example with this, with IKEA. So many years ago, I was out in Warsaw late at night and I was looking for IKEA. It wasn't long after I'd moved to Poland, so I didn't know even how to say where is or anything like that. Went into a garage and I just said, IKEA? And the guy behind the counter just looked at me strangely and kind of, shook his head. So, what I'd done wrong, of course, let me grab a pen, is that I should be said like ski. So it should be eek. And this E should be the same as in elephant. So it should be air. So I should have asked for E IKEA. IKEA instead of IKEA. And the pronunciation was so different that it wasn't understandable, even though it's obviously a major store and everybody would know where it was if you said it properly. Very luckily, somebody came out of the back room and he kind of just looked at me and he kind of said, IKEA? And I was like, yes. So it did all work out. But that shows you that pronunciation is the key in Polish. So learning how these letters are actually pronounced is the most important. And then secondly, exactly how the words end. But we'll move on to later how the words end and how you'll know how to change the word endings with some very simple rules which we'll build up on and refine along the way. Okay, so let's see if we've learnt anything useful. Here's a box of tea bags. And we're going to look at one of the main slogans on the side of it, and we'll just start in the middle there because probably you recognise that word immediately, especially now that you know that if you take the English word and you add a ny to it, you get the Polish one. So we can just take the ny off and you can see clearly it says natural. But how can we say that? We need to be able to pronounce that correctly. Okay, so we have to think this through. So we've got two A's there. We've got A as in apple, we know that. So we've got nat and we've got ral. We've also got a U there, which we got out of universal, so we know it should be an oo sound, oo. So here's how we should be saying it.
Naturalne. Naturalne.
Okay, and we can also take some fair guesses sometimes at things because there is often a transfer over that might not be so obvious, but if we think our way around it, we'll find it. So the last word there is smack. It just says smack. So we could have a think about that because this is food, a food type, well, a drink, but it's food. And we've got the same word in English, smack, and we talk about it, either smacking a child, but also smacking our lips together. And when we're smacking our lips together, we're thinking about something tasty. So it's quite possible that smack might be related to taste. And in fact, if we run it through Google Translate, that's exactly what we find. Smack is taste. So we've got natural taste there. That first word, we know how to say it. Again, this is a great example of knowing how to say a word, even if you don't know what it means. You've got O as in orbit, you've got A as in apple, and you've got that Y on the end, which you know is an sound. So you can actually pronounce it even though you don't know what it is.
Bogate. Bogate.
Now, that's one of those words where there's no real way to transfer it across or work out what it is except to reach for Google Translate or a dictionary to look it up, and that means rich. And that's rich as in, rich taste here, but also it can mean rich as in someone who's very wealthy.
Bogaty naturalny smak. Bogaty naturalny smak.
So to sum up, if you've got the English word which ends AL, then you add NY to it, and that gives you, most of the time, the spelling, or very, very close to the spelling. We've got the rule that we know that letters always sound the same. So if you see an A, you know it's like as in apple. Almost as important, and something to practice but not something to stress out and get right straight away, is that we emphasise the penultimate syllable. So in that normal, it's the mal, not a mal, that we're actually emphasising. We've also learnt that some brands of tea do have a natural taste. They may not be natural, but they have a natural taste. Now, one thing I do want to point out at the end of this lesson is don't expect to remember everything the first time through. This course, this lesson, and all the lessons in this course are designed not only to be watched, but also to be listened to. So you can always just put this on in the car, put this on when you're out for a walk, when you're washing the dishes, and listen if you just want to practice and remind yourself about some of these rules. So, a bit of homework for you before the next lesson. I'd like you to look into, why is the Polish word for scandal a scandal? Why is the Polish word for scandal a scandal?